you got it way over here. So keep going, dragging back over. Keep dragging back to you. Because you have it on this screen. It'll go. All right, good afternoon. So this is week 5 and a little over a quarter of the way done here. So jumping right in, this one we're going to do with the counseling issue dealing from the book we've been pulling from, Caring for the Souls of Children. And the one this week is Helping Anxious Children, and Julie Lowe had written this one. So to bring up the case study of a 10-year-old boy named Chris, and we find out from him that he recently lost a grandma, a grandpa, and a pet. Was all kind of right back to back. So he became anxious even about his own parents' health, even though they were very healthy, and his own health. And then it started to be acting out. He refused to go to school when he heard that several kids were sick. He didn't want to ride in the school bus anymore or allow his parents to take him to school. And then you also learn about his personality, that he has a perfectionistic personality, always wanting things done right. And that will play into the dynamic of how we interact with him. So there's some dynamics of our young man named Chris, someone you may run across as a camper. So as we walk with campers like this, understanding those who are anxious, that's an important part. So someone like Chris, where you're seeking to discern their personality, and I'm going to quote something from the book where it says, some kids like Chris have personalities that are more perfectionistic, which can lead them to have difficulty relaxing, to be driven by the desire to please, to be non-assertive, and to avoid conflict. Kids like this often struggle with fear of people, including fear of disappointing or failing, and they may put high expectations on themselves. All these tendencies lead to stress and anxiety. So I hope that makes sense of, as you're walking with a camper, you're trying to discern the personality of behind the anxiety. And then we're seeking to discern the persistence and the extent of the circumstances that they fear. Like, how often does this occur when you're trying to discern about those circumstances? And then seek to discern if fear is controlling them. So if we live in a world, a fallen world with dangers all around us, I mean, that's so. So how do I distinguish between a natural fear and just something that's controlling them? So questions we can consider is, how frequent is that fear and anxiety? How intense is it? How long does it last? And then, is that preventing the child from engaging in daily activities? Is it impeding them from taking healthy risks and engaging socially? So we're all going to face fears. I'm trying to discern how intense it is and how controlling it is in their lives. And then one more thing to seek to discern as you're walking with them is their false comforts that make life manageable. In other words, here's some categories to think through. Routine behaviors. So they run the comforts, and not that routine's bad, but that's a false comfort, a false savior. In other words, they always have this routine and they don't depart from it. Objects. You remember that when you're little kids, those little blankets or things that brought security? So what are the things that they run to? Who are the people that they have to be with? What activities they avoid? Like for Chris, he was finding that the only place he felt safe was in that home. So you're trying to discern the false comforts that they look to. So lastly, we just pointing them to the true comfort. How do we do that? Well, one important thing is, don't give them false comfort that bad things won't happen. We do live in a fallen world, so that's not giving them true comfort. Then through Christ's strength, you can share and embody the comfort he has given you. This is 2 Corinthians 1. Remember, it says the comfort that God is giving you is means for, I love the word we've looked at before, it cascades into someone else's life. Only by God's strength can that happen. So as God's working in you and you're experiencing his comfort, and they see that embodied in you, That's pointing them to true comfort. God continually offers his presence and comfort in the midst of fear. There's plenty of Psalms on that of he offers his presence right in the middle of it. And then pointing them to comfort, intervention steps can be taken progressively as they work through the fear while pointing them to greater faith in God. The book gave the example like with Chris, all right? Week 1, ride with mom and dad. Together you pray with them before you go. And then week 2, you may say, all right, this is our plan of action as we work toward getting back on the bus. So there's little steps of intervention where you're walking through with them, but continually pointing to faith in God. Well, 2 other passages I thought I'd bring up as you're just trying to bring in comfort. Luke 12 is, to me, one of a classic passages that calls, as we deal with anxiety, because it calls one not to fear. It identifies the heart behind fear where you're trying to control things. It gives insight into the detailed care and personal affection that God gives to his children. And then Philippians 4:4-6 is another one, just practical of, there is the command, don't be anxious. And then the practical thing of bringing all those things to God in prayer. So always we'll be doing this with our own life, and then as we're walking with anxious people, we're going to face it in this world, but how do I walk that through with campers? So, all right, we'll go on to the counseling tool. All right, as we move on to it, this one was actually connected to the anxious, dealing with anxiety. It's called a boat and refuge activity. The goals in using the tool is it gives understanding for one who is wrestling through that anxiety and fear, and it helps in revealing the emotions and how their beliefs impact their view of life. And also it helps to reveal what they're looking to for safety and stability. So directions and using it, and again, here's a sample way to use it. You can develop it and use it what best fits you in the week. So you can have them, whether it's just a piece of paper where you draw out a boat, just whatever kind of boats you would draw, and then the surroundings of the boat. It's almost like that one where we had the tree example. So that's the similarities, but here's some other things where you're asking questions about that drawing. Okay, so what type of boat did you draw? Are you in the boat? What are the things around the boat? What did you draw in the picture? In other words, whether the things that you put in that picture, are you in it? Again, that's revealing, particularly like the weather of that boat. What kind of sea is it in? And then you can be asking the questions regarding their view of God in the situation. Okay? If God were to enter that situation, how would he enter it? What would he look like? How would he come? If you were to use a picture to represent God with the boat and the sea around it, what would be a picture of God? And that would draw them into several pictures, or I should say, you can launch into several things how Scripture says how God is, a shield, a deliverer, a rock, a refuge. One of my favorite ones when I just think this through, this idea of the boat and the surrounding waves, is Psalm 121, where it speaks of God is my keeper, my guardian. And yes, I will face all these situations around me, but he will deliver me from evil. And the idea is this, not that I won't face evil and problems, but the boat's going to ride these waves, but with God, water doesn't have to get in the boat. And that's how intense God's care is of us. So a simple activity, you can adapt it. In other words, when I say adapt it to, you're allowing them, draw however you would put it. You're not putting restrictions on that. And some may just be quick, and it's like they draw, they don't connect it, they just throw out a picture. Some will think deeply on it. So use the tool how you would see best in that week. So, all right, we'll go into our example in counseling. All right, last one we'll look at is in this last section, again, taken from the Gentle and Lowly book by Dane Ortland. And this one focuses on he can deal gently. If you remember last week, he's able to sympathize with us. In Hebrews 4:15, a few verses later, he's saying in Hebrews 5:2, he shows us how he's able to interact with us, and he does it gently. So one was what he does, he goes into it with us, and then how does he do it with us? Very gently. So a couple thoughts under that. Who are the recipients of this gentleness? And you see in that verse, he's the ignorant and the wayward, the willful ones. So the ones who ignorantly interact with sin, the ones who willfully, the idea is everyone. There is no classification of one need being greater than the other. He's able to deal gently with all. A quote from that is, what elicits tenderness from Jesus is not the severity of the sin, but whether the sinner comes to him. Whatever our offense, he deals gently with us. If we never come to him, we will experience a judgment so fierce, it will be like a double-edged sword coming out of his mouth at us. So that's the balance. This isn't just a softer God, but it's like there's a gentleness, and if I really don't come to him, I do get the fierceness of his wrath because I turn away from him. That is the picture outside of Christ. And then what does that receiving, the receiving of that gentleness and the dispensing of this gentleness look like? When we sin, we can bring our mess to Jesus, and he knows exactly how to receive us. He doesn't deal with us roughly and lash out at us. He deals with us gently. And in his gentleness is not because he has a diluted view of our sin. Indeed, he knows our sinfulness more deeply than we do. He deals gently with us. What does that look like? Well, he feels our suffering as his own. When Jesus deals gently with you, he is doing what's most natural to his nature. This is not something forced. This is not something uncharacteristic of him. Two quotes from this. It says, our sinfulness runs so deep that a tepid measure of gentleness from Jesus would not be enough. But as deep as our sinfulness runs, ever deeper runs his gentleness. One more quote. The deeper into weakness and suffering and testing we go, the deeper Christ's solidarity with us. As we go down into pain and anguish, we are descending ever deeper into Christ's very heart, not away from it. So, again, we're looking at that, our great counselor, how he deals gently with us. And that affects how we walk with people. I know I didn't put this at the beginning, so I'll just say it now. That theme I want to keep putting in there is we're going through these sections is we're proclaiming Christ. And I hope you see that as we're going through this, proclaiming Christ, it's with our life, not just with our words. So again, we're taking something, putting it in the backpack, learning how to listen, and then may God keep growing us and changing us so that we can walk well with others. So the follow-up for this week is I keep putting on the saying, keep adding tools to that backpack. For just printing this stuff out, putting a notebook, adding to that to-do list. Hopefully this just spurs ideas. And you're like, I can't get to it all now because you're busy in school or busy with other things. Put it on a to-do list. Things you want to do for camp, to put in the backpack of your notebook or just things you want to bring. And then continue working on the personal growth project. So the questions change this week. So a specific thing I would recommend is today or whenever you listen to this, plan 2 10-minute times to sit down and work through that personal growth thing. Because it's easy to say, well, listen to the videos and I'm done. Take time to do that. And then please just keep that staff training. If you haven't done it, ask off time for it. Saturday and Sunday, May 27 and 28. All right, that's it for this week.
Gift of grace is Jesus my Redeemer. There is no more for heaven now to give. He is my joy. freedom, my steadfast love, my deep and boundless peace.